Hello and good morning to you all. My name is Kate Robertson. I am the co-founder of One Young World. Delighted to have you all here this morning. Very excited to be addressing this topic with you. As a brief introduction to One Young World, I'd like to show you a short film of what One Young World ambassadors around the world have been up to in the last 18 months. So take a look at this.
You are here because you're leaders, and you're not the leaders of tomorrow. You are the leaders of today.
We are so happy to be welcoming the whole world here to Bogota.
Welcome to the 1,300 brilliant young leaders from 194 countries around the world.
Despite all the problems that we have around us, we can create a world that we want to live in.
Real peace will not be achieved unless the youth are an essential part of it.
And that peace in this country and everywhere else will only work when you address the end of poverty. If we are to survive our century, you need to think.
The path to peace is fraught with difficulties and dilemmas, but the reward is worth the struggle.
If we're not too young to be soldiers, or too young to be victims of conflict, we're not too young to be part of the peaceful solution.
We did it. We achieved it. The young people did it in Colombia.
There's a wonderful group of UN ambassadors here. He said the best part of this week was when young people were speaking.
You do not have to quit your job to have an impact.
How do companies not just act with purpose, but how do they help to create the conditions for everyone with purpose?
So we are making a global call to action for all of you in business to put disability on their agenda.
We can't have a world of peace until we have equality. I got fired for pushing for equal pay.
I believe that girls and women should have the dignity of not having our bodies touched unwillingly.
We're not objects of charity, we're subjects of rights. And we're here not to ask favors, but to demand rights.
Fighting for human rights is not easy, but we fight on because of the commitment we made to leave no one behind.
The energy that came from these young people, I feel it really started with One Young World.
This conference is about young people making a difference and young people doing extraordinary things.
We raised $2.7 million from 95,000 young people around the world.
With education, we have been able to impact over 500,000 people in Latin America.
We were able to build over 5,300 shelters that housed over 26,000 earthquake victims.
I'll either end up dead or he will listen to me. So I met with him, and 2 days later, Gambia banned female genital mutilation.
I am a survivor of the genocide carried out in which more than 1 million people were killed. I saw my dad being killed and fed to the dogs to eat. I chose to forgive people who killed my father and all those innocent people. I chose to forgive them. Let's make this world a better place. Let's, each one of us, be the peace.
But world peace requires love. Love requires understanding. Understanding can hold no judgment, so when you smile, it shows your understanding.
So One Young World, we can change things. And peace is possible.
It always seems impossible until it's done.
And that's what you are all about, making impossible possible.
Success to me is fulfilling your full potential as a human being on this planet.
We are one people traveling on one planet towards one common future.
We can be the first generation to end extreme poverty and the last generation to live with the threats of climate change.
the international city of peace and justice, The Hague, calls on you.
See you next year in The Hague!
What will you do? What commitment can you make?
Stand up and be proud and tell the world that young people will take over and we will make the world a better place.
Thank you. So real courage in action there. The young One Young World ambassador that you see there acting for women's rights in Saudi Arabia, Lujain, is in prison at the moment. Those of you who tweet #free Lujain, real courage in action. So this morning, absolutely delighted to welcome our two guests. I'm going to introduce them to you, and then we're going to have a good discussion, judging on what we've been doing in the green room. First of all, Robbie Myers, who we're delighted to have you here, Robbie. It's really, really cool. 17 years, editor-in-chief at Elle Magazine. And, sorry, tremendous frog in my throat. Trying desperately not to cough at you. Somebody who's had the pleasure and the honor, and I guess jolly hard work, as a stylist for a lot of famous people on the red carpet, not least of which One Young World councillor Emma Watson, is Sarah Slutsky, who's a stylist and also the creative director at Chiffon, which is an ethical jewelry brand which was founded by a One Young World ambassador, Shilpa Yalagada. And we have to thank Shilpa for getting both of you here for us today. So forgive me for that blip.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Kate.
So hello and welcome. And I know that time is really precious for both of you. I know how busy you both are, but it's absolutely wonderful to have you here. So we're going to go to questions that we just, I think, almost started to discuss. And then at the end, we're hoping to go to the audience as well for more questions for you too. So first one, hard question. Issues in the fashion industry. What would be the thing that keeps you awake at night if, like me, you're an insomniac? What are the things about the industry that really get to you? You go, Robbie.
Well, first, I just want to say congratulations on all that you've accomplished. I mean, it's amazing, and we know that you're a relatively young organization to have done so much and reached so many young people. So hello out there, One Young World. I mean, a lot of things keep me up at night. In terms of the fashion industry, I think that, I don't have any, big secrets. I mean, it's obviously issues of diversity, it's issues of sustainability, it's, honestly, messaging. Really, just what do we talk about when we talk about fashion? And I think fashion is a conversation. It's about men and women, but it's mostly about women, I think. And so, what are we communicating? And who are the future leaders of fashion? And I'm not the first person to point out that fashion is changing so quickly. The whole industry is changing, and that has to do with the changes in media and in the changes in sort of production and communications. So many things. So what is fashion now? And I don't know that I don't pretend to have the answer, but it certainly is something that I think is keeping anybody who works in the fashion industry. It's an exciting moment for sure, because there's so many young new voices that now have platforms to communicate some of these ideas, but what is gained and what is lost.
Hi. First, also, thank you so much for having me here, and Bill and Kate, and this is an honor. There's such accomplishment in this room, and it's very humbling to sit here. Your question, yes, I'm an insomniac. It's surface level sometimes. Are my clients happy with me? Have I done everything I'm set out to do? But really, as a stylist, I often am thinking about is what I'm doing in the fashion space, encouraging young people to feel like they can be their best and their personal self without thinking that consumption is the answer. How do we be stylish? How do we, really be provocative and have a sense of dignity every day when we walk out the door without thinking the answer is more clothes, more things, more shopping. So, I really think in my line of work, I'm very fortunate to work with some of the most incredible women who are talented and have a platform for their voices to be heard. And I think through them, they've allowed me to really talk about style as a tool as opposed to shopping as the tool. And that's something I'm thinking about constantly as I'm going to bed at night.
You said, Robbie, this fashion changing so fast and industry changing so fast, and clearly coming at it from the point of view of a journalist, and clearly in terms of news and publishing and distribution, everything is just changing at the speed of light. And that brings you at the end of that curve or somewhere on that curve to social media. So we know now, I think a lot of us knew some time ago, but we know now about the link from social media to anxiety, to depression, to all manner of mental illness. How do you feel fashion has played and is playing in that at the moment? How does it seem from your perspective?
Well, I mean, I have to say it's such a complicated question. It's something I've been thinking about my entire career. Because if you work at a fashion magazine, if you work at any fashion media at all, which is really, I mean, Elle lives across many mediums, not just print, obviously, is that people constantly say, it's your fault that young people feel, that women feel bad about themselves. You know, what am I promoting? What am I doing to put forth sort of a view of women that is more expansive, I think, than what people see, right? And I think that for the longest time, people thought that fashion was this, cabal of people who got together and figured out a way to make women feel bad about themselves. And I don't, that's really not true. I mean, the fashion industry is run by incredibly creative people who really just want to express themselves. And it's a place where creative people often can find themselves because for the first time in their lives they feel welcome. And I know I'm sort of veering off your question, but the thing about, so I think what's happened in the last 15 years, and you guys are going to laugh at this, but when Project Runway, and Elle was, we partnered with Project Runway, and there was a lot of resistance to this. In many different corners, and they said, oh my, it's reality TV, blah, blah, blah. But it was really the first kind of thing that kind of cracked open. It was the first sort of media event that cracked open an idea for everybody what fashion kind of looked like. No, it's not
cracked
fashion,
open an industry.
Fashion. Right, yeah. And suddenly everybody thought, oh, gee, like these people are actually interesting, And I think it was the first show on reality show on television where there was actually something creative at risk as opposed to just staying on the island or whatever it was, that you saw these incredibly creative, passionate, kind of, sort of maybe messed up, but equally, engaged people. And suddenly I think that a whole world saw themselves in the fashion industry in a way that they never could before. And because of that, admissions to fashion schools jumped, and people were generally more interested in the fashion industry as a place where they could go, and there's so many different things you can do.
I thought in many respects it was a brilliant PR exercise on behalf of the industry, because the one thing that it really did show as a reality show, and this is not often with reality television, is it wasn't accidental that you were on that show or doing well. The amount of skill that was involved was just absolutely staggering. I just thought those contestants, some of them, the skill was just incredible.
Well, and that's true, but I also think it made people understand that it really wasn't just a bunch of, executives, sitting around in Paris going how can we charge people the most we possibly can for things they don't really need and things they don't really want that make other people feel bad about themselves. It's a very complicated, it's a very interesting and complicated world. Now, I'm sorry, try to get to answer your question, is, if you work in the industry, you constantly are, this is something you have to think about, how is it, what is it that we're talking to women about? What is it that we're messaging, and how are we making people feel about themselves? And, I've found that it's a place, it's an ongoing conversation where people can talk about other things, if you know what I mean. It's not just the clothes. It's about identity. It's about sex. It's about power. It's about passion. And, so I'm pro social media. I mean, it's a you never want to go backwards in any of these things, but, you have to be deliberate about what it is that you're saying.
Yeah, with you. Sarah.
Yes, I think this is such a multifaceted topic, and to go direct to your first point in the question, how is social media affecting us? And, we hear millennials are the most together but alone, generation to have ever surfaced. There's so much exposure, and we're constantly being fed information, and there's this sort of illusion that happens inside of the walls of social media, but it's also an incredible platform for conversation. It provides an outlet for voices that really do need to be heard. And to Robbie's point, I think we definitely don't want to go backwards. We definitely want to move forward. And I think that's kind of tied up in my up awake at night issue, is how are we, constantly able to communicate with one another and feel like we're benefiting from putting fashion in social media, putting the stories of people who are working in the industry in social media. To the Project Runway point, it kind of reminded me of when I was applying to university, and I also went to school for fashion, and I remember having a very long conversation with my family, lawyers, psychologists, very what you want to be when you grow up to have success in the Midwest. And I wanted to go to fashion school, and I remember sitting down and talking with my mom about how do we develop a price point? What is the cost of the creative mind, and what is the labor, and how are we actually valuing fashion? And I think it was the first time that, in my family, where fashion wasn't a topic of conversation all the time, it was really, about what unique qualities every individual can bring to the table in order to tell their story and to create their true sense of self and contribute in some way. Art is valuable, and there's the ongoing argument, is fashion art? And I'm one of the believers who says yes. I mean, it's something that really propels us forward in so many different ways. You can predict a political climate based on the fashion in the room. I mean, there's so many benefits of fashion. But I think, when we're talking directly about social media, in my own practice, I think it's really important to show an authentic day-to-day. There was a time where I was participating in 30 wears hashtags. So I wore the same pair of jeans every week for 30 weeks and styled it a different way because, I think there is this repetitive syndrome of we have to show newness, we have to show something, if it's not the brand new model, it's not shiny and good anymore. And I thought there was a really interesting communication that could happen about how we are actually promoting, love for the things we bring into our lives. And, when you purchase something, a fashion item, like you're voting with that dollar bill and you're choosing to bring it into your world and to care for it. And social media can be a place for that conversation.
You've both talked about identity, and you've just talked about an authentic identity. How do you see this thing that has happened now with social media, where you have what we now call the influencers, who are doing their own thing, have become almost like publishers in their own individual right? But it is different because their identities between the person and the professional are now completely blurred. How do you see that there? Is there authenticity there? How much does it matter? You first, Sarah.
This is a perfect question for my current life. I mean, I think as a stylist, there's a lot of conversation between me and my agency. How much do we show? What's private? What's not? I feel excitement from my Instagram community when I'm able to show little snippets of what we're doing to prepare for a red carpet, but also between my clients and I, what are they comfortable with me showing and what are they not? And I think for me, the most important piece of this puzzle is trying to be as honest as possible. Not every day is bright and shiny and full of rainbows and unicorns. There are struggles, there's hard work. And I think, to the previous question about how we are being honest and being aware of the mental health situations that can very much fluctuate in and out through our social media world, influencers do paint a picture of the best of the community for the most part. And I'm generalizing, obviously. But I think it is a really great thing to be able to show what goes into the day-to-day work of a stylist, or if a celebrity who's championing a cause. Here are all the pieces that go into that one great moment. And it is hard work, and it's not fluff, and there are many, many hours of labor that goes into, creating that one moment where they finally do hit the red carpet or address the United Nations.
But you see, it is your fault because you guys do make it look easy.
Well, can I just pop in here? I mean, because the question of authenticity. I worked at Interview magazine for Andy Warhol a long time ago, and the very first shoot that I went to...
You cannot be old enough to have done that. I don't believe
it. The very first shoot that I went to was at Robert Mapplethorpe's studio. It was the first time I was ever an assistant, and it was a pristine studio, and they were shooting Patty Hansen. Okay, and she had just had her baby, so that's who he was shooting, and I was just sort of there to be an assistant, and she walked in, and she was beautiful, and she kind of looked like my mom. Meaning, like, she was beautiful, she had red hair, she had freckles, and then 2 hours later, she was Patty Hansen, after hair and makeup and wardrobe and all that. So what is authentic? And my point about that story is, I think that every teenager looking in the mirror thinks that they are just a stylist, a good dress, hair and makeup, just, one thing away from being that. And in a weird way, it's kind of true. I mean, it's not really true, but what this idea of authenticity, what people are putting out, is a very manicured. These are very manicured images. They're very, they're highly produced, even if it's just like a selfie. The thing that's so interesting to me is that most of these influencers are millennials. If you say they're influencers, and if everybody's an influencer, then how influential are they going to end up being? If it's just going to be totally watered down. But if you talk about the Gen Z, they love to shoot ugly pictures of themselves and send them to their friends. They make the ugliest faces that they possibly can. They shoot themselves here, you know what I mean, with things like falling out of their mouths. And I don't want to say that I know that this is a reaction to this kind of, perfection that's put out there. But I also think, if you're getting paid to put on X shirt, the law now says that you're supposed to let people know that, but I don't think that people are. So I agree with you that it's great to show the industry, and it's a good way of reporting. It's a really quick and effective way of messaging. But to go back to the mental health question, it's very easy to look at those images and say, I'm never going to be that. I'm never going to look like that. I'm never going to feel like that. I'm never going to be on that boat in, wherever they are, sailing around, being fabulous. And I think that that's kind of, the question started out about, I think that's what can be crushing to individuals, on social media. But I think that we don't do enough to tell people that, there was a lot of effort that went into those images.
And let's be fair here with the industry. The only thing in this social media swirl is not the fashion industry. There's a whole lot of other dark stuff that's in there that is causing a lot of mental health issues. We know that. Coming back to fashion industry specifically, and something that I think we've been talking about forever, and is obviously high level of awareness at the moment, and it shouldn't really go away. You made the point, Robbie, and I think you were right. Fashion, largely, we're talking about women, not only, but largely. And yet, executive places in the industry, 75% of them are men, right at the top of the tree. What's that about? And is it going to change?
Well, it was ever thus. I mean, I'm sorry, Sarah, to sort of jump in here, but I reviewed a book called "That's What She Said: What Men Need to Know and Women Need to Tell Them," and it's actually a very good book, and it's incredibly depressing because it is the lack of women at the top of you name it, any industry. I mean, even academia, business, politics. Women just aren't there at the top. And as much as we think this is the year of the woman, or was that last year? Or was last year the year of the woman? Is next year the year of the woman? We'll see. The midterms are coming this year. Still, I mean, I'm sorry, 4%, 8%, 12% is not a full representation of women. So when you say what's it about? It's about power, and it's about money, and it's about privilege, and I think that we're changing, and I hope quickly. But the good thing is, I mean, that we have many women designers for the first time at big houses, the places that have the biggest marketing and production budgets, et cetera, et cetera. So you see more ideas coming from women that other women want to consume. And look, I'm not saying that all designers should be female. I'm just saying, we need creatives. We need female creatives everywhere. We need, female bosses.
Sarah? I also think, we're still learning as females competing in a very oversaturated marketplace, how to be nicer to each other, how to support each other's growth and development, how to encourage, how to be collaborative, how to see those around you as peers who eventually lead to a fuller, richer pot of success. I think the moment we start realizing, joint success is success for all, we can start upward mobility. I cannot begin to stress that enough. You never know. The person who's working under you might someday be your boss. They might someday be someone with the next big idea to collaborate. This is such a easy change, please and thank yous and support and asking, what's your idea? How can I bring you into this conversation? Does this make sense? Do you, see this another way? And together coming as a team to move forward versus, feeling like we're all fighting for that one, spot at the top of the table.
Well, and I think Sarah's right. I think it's going to be women helping women, and frankly, men. There are plenty of men who are feminists. But I'm just going to tell you one little study. It's going to kind of blow your mind. So, there was a study that was done of heterosexual couples at college. Okay, and they brought the couples in, and they gave the woman a test, and they gave the man a test. And at the end, if the woman did better than the man was crushed. Okay, his self-esteem went down. However, if the man did better than the woman was fine. And my point of bringing this up is that I think that there are some very, we're talking about changing society, changing culture. They're very deeply held. I think there are many men that wouldn't even want to sort of admit to that those were their feelings, that they feel threatened by powerful women. And I'm not saying that this is true of all men. It's just, it was one study on one campus, but I think that when we're really going to get down to talking about how this power structure is going to change, that it has to come from both men and women understanding what their vulnerabilities are.
My concern with it would be my observation, and I think it even applies to the millennial and the Gen Z age group. My concern with it is I think women talking to women all the time, because we all know what we think and we all know what we want to change. If we don't take the guys with us, ain't nothing going to change.
Yeah,
it's just something that we are absolutely dealing with. That's why I think they called it right with he for she. We have to have the guys on side, otherwise, to your point about power. But let's talk about something I know is dear to both your hearts, yours particularly, and Shilpi Yalagarda. But do you think in a world where we know in every single facet, in everything that the human race is engaged in, we are using up too much resource? Is the fashion industry are we ever going to do enough? No. Is the fashion industry making strides, let's put it that way, in terms of sustainability? Obviously, everybody's got a long way to go. Or are the efforts superficial and then we slide backwards? And especially in an industry where we've been talking for the last 7 or 8 years about disposable, cheap fashion, and we know how that happened. Do you want to go first? You're both experts on this.
I still feel like there's so much to learn because it's such a complicated issue. There's a lot of layers of sustainability. There's environmental sustainability, there's human sustainability, there's economic sustainability. I think fast fashion for me is a starting point for all levels of sustainability, and I think the more communication we have with consumers directly about what every dollar equates to. I think it's really hard to reason that, any manufactured good should cost less than $10. How is that possible? It's coming from across the world. There are, there's dyes, there's labor, there's the whole creative team we talked about before. What was their value worth? I think that we've been taught as consumers that clothing should be inexpensive. And of course, I'm talking also from a place of privilege where there is access to consuming. There are some people who don't have the means, and we need to have a solution for them as well. But generally, here sitting in this room, to be informed about the items that we're taking into our households and what we're committing to care for. There is a reason for certain price points, and of course there are markups, and of course there is luxury. But I think to be a questioning consumer is very important in today's day and age. How much water goes into dyeing a pair of jeans? I mean, it's extraordinary. And not only that...
How much was that? I was looking at that figure. This one's like 10,000 litres?
I believe it's more than that, but I don't want to...
Well, it's too much.
It's too much. It's definitely too much. And
yeah, as you say, it's too much.
And the lifeline, too, of a good produced at a lower cost. It's not going to last forever, and you're going to have to buy another piece again quite quickly. So, the economic sustainability for the consumer is, you end up spending more in the long run anyways. I think it's
Well, I mean, look, to answer your question, I mean, I think, everything starts with awareness, and I think the fashion industry as a whole, they're certainly aware that this is something that consumers care about. And, you have companies like Kering, which have really made a commitment to... And what they're doing is they're cleaning up their whole supply chain. So it's not just that the garments are necessarily made out of, are made in a sustainable way, but the woman who runs the program at Kering makes the point that they're also going paperless. It's also what they do as a company that any company should be doing and can be doing. And it's really like, that they don't have styrofoam cups by the water cooler, et cetera, et cetera. But I also think there's an enormous amount of greenwashing going on. And I was reading a story about, there's a term for it, it's a term of art, cycling or something, and it has to do with, where your clothes start and then where they end up, and do they get recycled, and do they go back? And, some huge company, some global company, made a commitment of giving $1 million a year to, putting up recycling bins. $1 million a year for these companies is a rounding error. That's the coffee budget, really. And so they say it, they say, look at what we're doing, but it's like, okay, great, but what are you actually doing? Because that's basically, that should go under the PR budget.
The greenwashing is a point. I think the other side of it is what we find in work at One Young World, is a lot of the big corporates are actually doing quite a lot. Right. And not talking about it. Right. And my argument with them is always, would you please tell people what you're doing so other people follow suit? But these are such huge topics we could talk for hours. I want to move on to, do you mind if I move on? Yeah. I want to move on to talk a little bit about diversity. So people who have disabilities, what our friend Paul Pullman at Unilever calls diffabilities, because they're just people who are different, represent a market worldwide of 1 billion people. We've got a brilliant One Young World ambassador, and Sinead Burke, who was on the cover of Business in Fashion, where they did the 2 covers. One was Kim Kardashian, and one was Sinead, who's become a really good friend of ours. And her point about business in fashion, to the business that you're in, was here we are a market that's almost as big as China. What is the industry doing about people who have disabilities and who, in a variety of ways, are not able to access what we're selling in the fashion industry? You go first, Sarah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a topic that encompasses a lot of different challenges. I mean, addressing all walks of life, people from all different communities and with different needs, I don't think we have quite yet reached a even acceptable number of options for people with different needs. I'm definitely not an expert in this topic, but I do know, when I'm dressing clients of all different backgrounds and of all different, needs and comfort levels, as a stylist, I'm not shopping. I'm pulling from the designers and what's available to me from their sample set. And it's a very difficult task on both ends. Designer samples are created to help move their line forward, to help editors and buyers select for the next season. And so it's an expensive investment for them to have a full range of samples in a lot of different, cuts and fits and fabrics. But on the other hand, dressing has become a way of creating press and PR for these brands. And so the conversation of what is available for all types of women, it's something that I find myself speaking loudly and pushing for quite often. And, I think the more exposed we are and the more, need to be creating content on the regular, it's inevitable that we have to open up our doors and our studios to make sure that all types of people from all places in the world have access to the same style as, that sample.
As everyone else, absolutely. Robbie.
Well, I mean, you bring up the word, sample size. So, okay, it's sample size. Well, what is that? That's a 6-foot woman. It's what she wore on the runway. She's 5'10", 5'11", she's probably a size 2 or a 4, right? And that's what Sarah has to choose from. So you can get a seamstress there, right? But in terms of the samples, so let's just start with the samples. The samples are built because there's a presumption that the women they're going to dress, they're going to show on the runway, they're all going to be uniformly more or less the same size. Now, I sympathize with the designers for the same reason you do. I mean, they have to get the show out there. They're working, and most of them don't have piles of money that they can draw from. But there's a lot of conversation around this word diversity, because what does it assume? It assumes that there's a group of people that are the norm, and that people who are not that, they're going to diversify, right? So it still is a weird kind of control, because what we're really talking about are human beings, right? And so to say that the fashion industry or the television industry, those industries that make images and put them out there that people, my daughter looks at and goes, oh, I'd like to be like that. There are efforts at this idea of diversity, but again, there's a lot of tokenism, and the idea is, there's all kinds of diversity. I mean, there's as you said, financial diversity. There's certainly sexual diversity, identity, size, age, and if there is the runway in fashion, but then there's also the images, the marketing images, and those images are on Instagram now. They are on social media.
I thought Sinead made, and I should explain for the audience who don't know Sinead Burke, is that Sinead is what she calls a little person. But Sinead's point, I think, is very much, and to your point, and take very seriously the points that you're making about greenwashing and tokenism. Absolutely, you are right. But I thought her points are well made, in as much as she's talking about it's not even the issue around the sample size. She's saying when people with disabilities go into a store, in Sinead's case, can she reach the rack to take a dress down? No, she can't. Someone who maybe can't see properly has a different problem. All those things are difficult for the retailers. But to your point about what's not a lot of money, the small changes they could be making to make selling goods to people with disabilities a lot easier, and ignoring this market of 1 billion people.
I would really love to say just one thing on this point, is because we do come across so many different walks of life. You walk down the street in New York, and the representation from every nation can be at your
all the world is there.
But I think the point actually here is tolerance and inclusion, and the ability to ask questions, to understand one another. And when you see somebody who isn't just like you, how do you say, how are you? What do you need? Let yourself be open to learning and exposing yourself to a different point of view, so that you can not only better yourself, but better their experience. When you see somebody who walks into a store and, can't reach the rack, don't shy away and assume, that they don't want your help. Make yourself open to having that conversation, so that as we learn about one another, we can be inclusive and we can start solving for problems that are very complicated.
Except walk in my shoes, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
I'm going to go to the audience because I'm sure the audience have got questions for the pair of you. As I said, we were saying earlier, we could talk all day. Okay, we're going to the audience for questions. Over here.
Hi, thank you so much. My name's Mary. I really like the conversation that you've had so far, particularly the focus on style. Following on from that, I was at the Met Museum yesterday and seeing like the Heavenly Bodies exhibition was just amazing. So I guess my question is, how do you guys remain authentic and increase your creativity? What tips do you have? Is there kind of a ritual you do on a daily or weekly basis that can maybe inform some of the work that we do with One Young World?
Well, I mean, it's all about the eye. The eye is hungry, the eye wants, the eye sees. And it's about looking and it's about seeing. I mean, it's a pretty basic answer to your question, but the fact that you were at the Met and you saw that, I mean, and while you were going to that exhibit, you also saw other things, and I think that it's really just about curiosity. And the great thing about the internets is that you can find anything now, right? And you can go anywhere. You can get lost, and waste a lot of time there. But I mean, I'm sorry. I wish I could give you a sort of a more complicated answer, but I think it's really about curiosity and honestly engagement with other people, really.
Yeah. I think, when it comes to personal style, when I'm talking to a new client for the first time, I always ask them, what are your goals? What are you hoping to put forth into the world when you step out the door, and where are you going? And I think the number one thing that we strive to achieve is, your clothes should support that vision, and it should be able to allow you to do whatever you're doing that day to the best of your ability. I'm actually moving pretty soon, so I'm going through a big closet clean out and touching everything I own and thinking how does this make me feel when I wear it? Do I feel powerful? Can I communicate? Can I not wait to wear it? And it's actually a practice I ask when I'm shopping as well. Can I see myself in this for years to come? Do I want to invest in this because this is not a small decision? It's something I'm going to have, and I'm going to have it for a long time, and this is my hard-earned money going towards something new. And if you can't say yes, then it's not for you. But I truly believe every piece of clothing that you invest in should support you as you embark on your day-to-day journey, being the best version of yourself. Yeah.
Thank you. Next, who's next? Here we go.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed your discussion. My name is Sarah Slutsky. I'm a human rights lawyer, and I'm also a model. And my question is about size diversity. I just walked my first New York Fashion Week this past February, and while thank you. And while because of my height and majority of my measurements, I fall into that sample size, my hip measurements and my hip bone put me outside of that sample size. And I never thought I could actually do runway because of the standards that they have with specific measurements. And I just want to give a shout out to Carmen Steffens because she did make alterations to my outfit to make it work for me. But do you think there is more room with high-end designers, because I was not able to book a lot of high-end designers for the Fashion Week, that will be more inclusive with body shape diversity?
Well, I was thinking about this question because I think in New York actually is, New York is way ahead in terms of diversity on the runway. I mean, you go to Europe and it's actually kind of shocking. So I think it's great that you're in New York, and I think that it's something that the New York fashion world has embraced and is trying to embrace. So I think it's yes. I mean, I could just answer your question with a word. Yes, I do. I do think, but particularly in New York.
I agree. New York is a great place, and I think there are a lot of designers working really hard to, be aware of our surroundings and, are very news focused and aware, but also genuinely wanting to be a part of that conversation, but inclusion and also, there's a lot of beauty out there, and the more we celebrate different types of beauty, I think we all benefit.
And you look at somebody like Christian Siriano. I mean, he's actually made a business out of this, of saying, you know, like these famous women, designers don't want to dress them, I'll dress you. And the women are proudly saying, thank you for dressing me, and, you know, standing up for him. And I think, you know, it's helped his business enormously, but also I think he's kind of, you know, tweaking the industry a little bit to say, step up, right? But I think a lot of New York designers do.
You are talents that are really awesome, and I think changing the world, both of you. Continue to do so, I do hope so. We've been honored to have you here. Thank you, Sarah Slutsky. Well, thank you, Robbie Myers. And now, to end with, we're going to look at a very brief video from our friends at Verizon.
Polk County is one of the counties that you don't think about very much. It's really not very important.
I was in the Stone Ages as much as technology-wise, and I would say I had nothing.
You become a school teacher for one reason. You love kids. And so you don't have the same tools. You don't always believe that you have the same outcomes achievable for yourself.
When we got the tablets, it changed everything.
By giving them that technology and then marrying it with a curriculum that's designed to have technology at the heart of it, we are really changing the way that students learn.
And I can't wait for 10 years from now when I get to talk to them again and see like who they are.